He was sentenced to 25 years in prison in 2014. But Brian, what we know is that soon after he took office, the newly elected district attorney, Sean Dick in Williamson County, agreed to review this case after Greg Kelley's new lawyers went to him and said that they had substantial, credible evidence that Greg Kelley did not do this crime. That triggered a big hearing in August 2017. It was basically like a do-over of the trial in which evidence was presented in Greg Kelley's favor. A state district judge in Williamson County ruled soon after that she believed Greg Kelley's conviction should be overturned, but we've been waiting for more than 2 years for the state's highest criminal court to decide Greg Kelley's ultimate fate, and that is what they have done this morning.
So as we run out of time here, what's next in this case?
Well, so the case has to go back to Williamson County, according to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and it will be up to Williamson County authorities about what they do next. But what we know is that Sean Dick has said publicly he doesn't believe in this case. He has never believed in this case based on the evidence. And so Greg Kelley will likely be able to go live his life as a free man with this conviction overturned once and for all.
Big news, no doubt about it. Tony, thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
We're going to get back to the live with Kelley and Ryan now, but Tony and I are going to stay to continue this breaking news to get more into the case and into today's ruling, streaming live at KVUE.com and, of course, the KVUE app as well and the Facebook page. So we'll have that for you. And be sure to catch midday at 11 and the news at 5 and 6 with more on this big ruling today. Again, Greg Kelley, the conviction overturned. We'll have more later today right here on KVUE. All right, welcome back. We're here live now online and on Facebook. Senior reporter Tony Plahetsky here. We're talking about the Greg Kelley ruling. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals essentially overturning his conviction, making him again a free man. He's been free on bond for 2 years now, but now he can officially, it looks like it's going to be the case where he can officially be that free man. He said he was innocent the entire time.
Exactly. And you know, Brian, this is a case, just going back to 2013, that has galvanized the public's attention. People have been so interested in this case, very impassioned on both sides, really. I can remember covering the hearing back in 2017 where new information was brought forward, and it has really been an open question whether or not the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals was going to go along with what a judge ruled in Williamson County. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals is a very conservative court. They often do not look kindly upon what is called actual innocence claims. They rarely grant them. And what's so interesting is that usually when they do, it involves some type of DNA evidence, that new, compelling, and convincing scientific information comes forward, and then they grant relief. But that is not what we have in this case. What happened is that in August 2017, the case was essentially retried. We saw the prosecution bring forward a volume of new evidence, and the judge was so swayed by that evidence that she ordered, and this was very rare at the time, continues to be very rare. You can see the video there of him being released from prison in 2017 on bond because of this judge's order. She was so compelled by what she heard in that hearing about new evidence in support of Greg Kelley that she ordered that he should be released from prison. And so Greg Kelley has been living on bond in the Austin area. He's also been traveling the country, according to his social media pages, and has been out on bond, yet at the same time not really able to live his life fully because this big decision has been forthcoming.
We're going to get to the timeline real quick, but I do want to emphasize nothing was said about this victim making a story up or anything wrong with the victim side of this. It's just that Greg Kelley, in their opinion, was not the person that committed the crime. I think we want to clarify and make sure
That's
people
right.
understand. We're not saying that the crime didn't happen.
That's right.
They're saying that he didn't do it.
And law enforcement and prosecutors have really been steadfast in their belief that something did happen to a 4-year-old boy. This all happened at a house where Greg Kelley was living at the time. He was living with a friend of his. That friend's mother operated an in-home daycare. So there were a lot of children in that house. Prosecutors and law enforcement, again, have said that they believe that this child was the victim of a crime. It was just a matter of who committed the crime. And what they have said publicly is that a sad reality of this case is that no one apparently is going to be charged with that crime or face justice for that crime.
Let's talk. Greg Kelley actually mentioned the victim when he was released. I guess that was August of 2017.
Exactly.
I think we have that for you now if we want to play that.
I'm sorry, but I didn't do that to your child. Someday I hope I can meet you and I can explain to you that it wasn't me. I just hope that you can have peace in this moment.
That, of course, was Greg Kelley upon release back in August of 2017. He has been free since that day. Now, let's go back to the timeline. He was arrested in 2013. In July is when the trial began the following year, 2014. Of course, he was found guilty. Now, at the time, they offered a plea deal. Say you did it, register as a sex offender, and you're out. You don't have to go to jail at all. He said, I didn't do it. I'm going to take the mandatory 25-year sentence that comes along with this guilty verdict, and he was convicted.
And he was convicted. One of the things that's interesting to note, Brian, and I think we have this sound as well, from a juror I interviewed after the fact, who frankly sobbed that he did vote to convict Greg Kelley. He was the holdout juror. He voted to convict Greg Kelley, and what he described a couple of years ago when I interviewed him is just a life of regret that now that he regretted deeply having made that vote, that he felt that he kind of succumbed to the pressure from other jurors in the room. And this is what he had to tell me at the time.
When they were polling everybody, and I can't remember where I was in the jury. I know I was closest to the people in the seats. Everybody was saying guilty, that is my vote, and Ike almost said not guilty, but I didn't. Should have. Just thinking about what happened. Thinking about what's going through his head sitting in that prison cell when he shouldn't be. Nobody should have to go through something like that, especially if they're innocent and they know they're innocent.
Brian, I'm not sure how much of what that juror said weighed on the Court of Criminal Appeals. I do know that he submitted a sworn affidavit essentially attesting to what he told me in that interview a couple of years ago when this was all underway. The process to undo Greg Kelley's conviction was underway.
Just hard to listen to that, and you can tell he agonized over it, and still probably to this day does. We do want to talk about kind of the reason this all happened in 2017, the new evidence, the new alternate suspects, not just one but two, and we have a graphic to show you what we're talking about. One of the other suspects in the case that helped this process begin was a young man named Jonathan McCarty, who actually was around this same time, and you can see the resemblance here. A 4-year-old, of course, was accusing someone of assaulting them, and this is the similarity between the two. Jonathan McCarty on the left, and you can see Greg Kelley on the right. And I guess as far as the defense was concerned, maybe it was a mistaken identity that brought us to this point.
Well, and it frankly wasn't just the defense. The state, the prosecution, when they were reviewing this case, they also publicly declared Jonathan McCarty an alternative suspect and believed, including these pictures, that there was compelling evidence that perhaps a young child, a 4-year-old boy, could have misidentified who his perpetrator was. We want to be clear. Jonathan McCarty has never been charged with this crime. He has never been convicted of this crime, but he was publicly identified as an alternative suspect. I will say that Jonathan McCarty ultimately was charged with unrelated crimes and was sentenced in those unrelated crimes. But again, no one has ever been charged besides Greg Kelley, and of course the conviction now overturned, with assaulting that 4-year-old boy.
The words written by the Court of Criminal Appeals struck me, Tony, and I'm going to read just a couple of sentences here in the conclusion to their report. Quote, "I agree the system failed the applicant, for it convicted an innocent man, but I do not agree the applicant's constitutional rights were violated by either the Cedar Park Police or the trial counsel." So that's important to note as well. They claim in their report he's an innocent man.
Right.
But there wasn't a lot of problems done along the way, maybe, that caused him to be convicted.
Well, I think one of the reasons that the court is saying that is that actually two major contentions by Greg Kelley's legal team is that he was the victim of a negligent investigation by the Cedar Park Police Department. Cedar Park Police have vigorously fought against that, as have other people, including the state's largest police association. They actually submitted a brief to the court saying that Cedar Park was not negligent in their investigation. Greg Kelley's defense also brought forward a contention that his attorney during his original trial had a conflict of interest. She very much has fought against that. Patricia Cummings is her name. She's a well-known, well-decorated, very decorated person in the legal community, attorney in the legal community. But she had represented members previously of Jonathan McCarty's family. And so what Greg Kelley and his attorney said is that because of that, she had a conflict of interest to not potentially raise this issue that someone else, even in that household, may have done the crime. The court, though, not really going along with those two arguments today, and in fact taking steps to point out that they don't really go along with those two arguments. Again, the substance of their ruling today is that they simply believe that based on what we know now and what we didn't know then, is that no reasonable juror would have convicted Greg Kelley, and that is the reason they are overturning this conviction.
Again, if you're just tuning in, Greg Kelley from Leander, a football player convicted of, I guess, sexual misconduct of a child with a child.
The charge is actually called super aggravated sexual assault, and the word super because of the really young age of the child. I believe the law says if the child is 6 and under, the crime is so egregious that it calls for stiffer penalties.
Mandatory
25 years, which is what Greg Kelley received.
And of which he served, I guess, about 3
years.
Now,
exactly.
You had a chance to talk to him while he was still incarcerated.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, that was right before he was brought back, wasn't it?
That's right.
To Williamson County. So what did he say? What was his demeanor then? He seemed like he was always steadfast in denying he did anything wrong.
Always steadfast and very much looking forward to his day in court. And one of the things that I can remember, I talked about this at the time, that was so striking to me is interviewing him in prison, and it was almost as though, you know, the prison employees, the guards, the wardens, if you will, believed Greg Kelley. Wow. And so a lot of times when you're interviewing someone in prison, you don't have the ability to sit next to them. You have to talk through and interview them through, you know, the glass plate. But Greg Kelley, it was really sort of a relaxed atmosphere because he was allowed to sit in a room and a kind of a common area, and that's where we interviewed him. But I remember asking him to simply just describe himself, and here's what he had to say.
A Christian man. I'm an innocent man, as in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I have a desire to do a lot of good in the world. I want to be a husband and a father with Christian morals and principles and values.
So a very interesting interview there, and soon after that, as you mentioned, Brian, Greg Kelley was brought back to Williamson County to have this hearing in August 2017, during which he presented this new evidence in the case about whether or not he was guilty or not, of course, presenting evidence of his innocence, which, again, the Court of Criminal Appeals is agreeing with and siding with him today.
So let's take people forward from here. What happens next? Is he free? Is he done? Does he have a record? How does that work from this day forward?
So I think the biggest question that Greg Kelley is going to face is whether or not he's going to be eligible for compensation for his 3 years in prison. This ruling, as I look at it, doesn't make that abundantly clear. The court seems to be nudging in the direction that he is actually innocent. They use those words, but there has to be there has to be a very much a legal finding of actual innocence. The DA in Williamson County, Sean Dick, can do that himself, but someone is going to have to check the actual innocence form for Greg Kelley to be entitled to, it's $80,000, I believe, for each year that he served in prison. He's also, if he is declared innocent, if that form is checked, if that box is checked on the form, he'll also be eligible for free tuition at any Texas university, which he and his supporters, I want to point this out, Brian, consider that one of the major tragedies of all of this, and that is Greg Kelley was a high school football player. He had dreams of playing college ball, and he's getting older now. He's in his mid-20s. I think I looked up yesterday, he's 24 years old. And so they have always felt the clock ticking just in terms of Greg Kelley's ability to pursue this major dream of playing college ball. So he will be free to go live his life. He's kind of been doing that, as we've said, in the past couple of years. But his name essentially has been cleared as of today.
It's been an amazing story for him and his family and his supporters. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he at least had a scholarship or a partial scholarship to UT San Antonio right out of high school.
Yeah.
Great football player, great young man from all accounts. I've just checked the Facebook page for his supporters. It looks like he's living his best life in New York.
Yeah.
Hopefully he has a good time there today in light of this.
And is engaged to be married, and I understand that there is a wedding planned for early next year. His high school girlfriend has stuck by him this entire time, and they are living their life together in New York right now.
Well, Tony, as always, stellar work by you. Appreciate your time. We're going to wrap it up here. But again, Tony will be back on midday, and you've got about an hour and 20 minutes to rest.
To read. To
read through this. Again, the Court of Criminal Appeals in the state of Texas essentially saying Greg Kelley didn't do it. He's innocent of the charges against him, and now Williamson County will essentially rubber stamp that, I guess, is what's going to happen as we go forward. So, Tony, thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being with us. Make sure and check out Midday and the rest of Tony's reporting online and on the news tonight at 5 and 6. Have a wonderful day.